Cigarettes, cell phones, and cars. Three social tools relevant to young people today, and almost timeless social tools which are relevant to young people all over the world. What is it that these three social tools have that unites them? And how do they interact with each other? So, if we look at the research that we unearthed in the Mobile Youth book, the chapter entitled Cigarettes to Mobile Phones, we found that there's this fascinating replacement that cigarette consumption actually went down only when mobile phones became available. Forget the 30 years of public health education that preceded the decline in cigarette usage by teenagers. It was when a social tool arrived on the scene that had a similar benefit to the cigarette that we actually started to see cigarette usage decline. Now, on the face of it, you see cigarettes and you see technology and you see them unrelated. But underneath, if you go to the level of context, and this is what really we want to talk about now, you see a whole new different story. And that's really the story that I want to introduce my colleagues Ghani Kunto and Freddie Benjamin to help share some insights on. Ghani, you mentioned the role of cars in Tanzania, in Africa, and how they are a social tool for young people growing up. And I think that's fundamentally a universal thing, isn't it? That cars are social tools everywhere in the world for people because they're so universal. And cigarettes too, and mobile phones as well. There seems to be a class of product which really is agnostic to the culture it belongs to or will appear in. And you could name sort of maybe a handful of products that seem to sort of transcend all culture, language, and gender differences and so on. And they're very special products, and I'm just wondering, what do we know about those products? Because they seem to somehow vary a lot in content, but contextually they're very universal and very similar.
With cars and mobile phones and cigarettes, they all help young people get together, for better for worse, right? And gets people at the same time. It makes them different than the rest, because if you're going to be getting a smoke, then you have to step outside and be with the smoker, or, all back of the bus and stuff, right? It says something about you, and the same thing with cars and then mobile phones too.
These insights that we're sharing now are really it's a fundamental story about phones not as technology but as something else. Really, it's about something that's much more fundamental in our daily lives, because we're not buying them for the technology. Particularly young people, they're not buying the technology, are they? They're buying the social benefit.
This is basically a story about how phones are social tools, right? And when I read it, I was reminded of that interview I had with one of the students from Tanzania, who was talking about how cars there used to be the main social tool. Smoking, it is, but like in Indonesia, it's still big. But cars used to be this one thing that if you have a car, you're somebody different, right? Or if you have a car that's nice, you're even better than the rest, right? But now it's changing to phones. Like phones are the main social tool. Now, if you drive a fancy car but you have a cheap phone, you're still nobody. Like the girls, and I guess more importantly, other guys might think that you might have borrowed the car, or it's your uncle's, or maybe you're even the driver.
I think what's kind of come out of doing the research on this area is what we discovered was this wasn't simply a case of cigarettes replacing mobile phones, right? There's a lot more complicated going on in the background. So I'm just curious to know what sort of the underlying stories are about one social tool replacing the other. What do you think, Freddie?
Yeah, one of the things that came to my mind, this the whole story of like cigarettes to mobile phones. It's like there's like two parts of it. One is sort of like the customer insight part, the youth insight part, which is like young people buy based on emotion, and what they buy is the context, not the content. So that explains sort of like why they, have always sort of been into smoking, because there's a social context to it. And the drive to smoke is not because they like cigarettes or the taste of it, but because it provides that social benefit, and it's very emotional. So that's sort of like the customer insight aspect of it. And the other part of the story is like like how mobiles have replaced cigarettes, it also shows sort of like the big change in culture, which is the rise of the culture of fear. Cigarette smoking declined, um, also partially because smoking as a behavior has been demonized around the world,
Hmm.
which is, if you smoke, it's not just like bad for your health, but you're essentially a bad person. And like your girls are gonna look at you and think, well, you probably do drugs as well, and that kind of stuff. And that, in a way, it has like, going back to the story about how we used to have archery lessons, but now we don't. We used to have open play for kids, but now we don't. And in a way, what it signifies is that we have moved to this culture of fear. And even with mobile phones now, what we see is, people complaining how much young people text, how much time they spend with their mobile phones. What are they talking on the mobile phones because their parents cannot monitor it.